The final delivery. Dark clouds loomed ominously in the night sky, thunder rolling in the distance. Rain splattered against car windshields as people rushed home to the safety of their warm, lit houses. Meanwhile, Ethan, a young and weary food delivery driver, sat perched on his scooter under the dim glow of a streetlight. His shift was nearly over, but this would be another night of long hours trying to cover rent. Just as he prepared to log out of the app, his phone buzzed unexpectedly. The notification caught his eye immediately. High priority delivery, double pay. That wasn't something to ignore. However, as he tapped on the order, his stomach twisted. The address was unmarked, located far off on the outskirts of his small town. It was late, a storm raged on, and his instincts told him to decline. But the thought of easy money silenced his concerns. It's just another delivery, Ethan reassured himself, hitting accept. He revved his scooter and took off into the rainy night. Ethan's scooter cut through the empty, water-slick streets as he followed the GPS directions. The storm grew heavier as thick sheets of rain blurred his vision. The repetitive calm of a usual delivery route was absent this time. Something didn't feel right. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he could sense it in his gut. Soon strange things began happening. The GPS, previously his loyal guide, started to glitch. The screen froze, flashing erratic lines before redirecting him to unsettlingly narrow, unlit roads. Ethan stopped multiple times to adjust his phone, desperate to regain control. Stupid thing, he murmured, his annoyance masking faint dread. As the streets became increasingly desolate, Ethan spotted fewer houses and more overgrown vegetation creeping toward the road. By the time his GPS chimed, "You've arrived at your destination," he found himself staring up at what could only be described as the wrong place. The house stood isolated under a canopy of swaying trees. Time had not been kind to the already weathered structure. The once white paint was peeling, and shuttered windows stared at him like hollow eyes. A single porch light flickered weakly, offering little comfort against the consuming darkness around it. "Is this it?" Ethan whispered to himself, squinting at his phone. The app confirmed the location, even urging him with a message. "Hand delivery required. Do not leave unattended." Against his better judgment, Ethan parked his scooter at the edge of the driveway and walked hesitantly toward the house, the food bag gripped tightly in his hand. Ethan knocked firmly on the door, hoping this errand would be over quickly. He waited. The sound of rain on the porch roof amplified the silence. He knocked again. Still no answer. He glanced down at his phone, contemplating whether to leave the bag and head out. Suddenly his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. Another notification. "We see you. Come in." Something about the message sent chills down Ethan's spine. He turned to look behind him, scanning the stormy, dark property, but finding no one. His breathing quickened. Maybe it was a prank? A glitch in the app? Nevertheless, curiosity and the app's persistent instructions got the better of him. Testing the door, Ethan found it unlocked. His hand hesitated on the doorknob for a moment, before pushing lightly. The creaking of the old wood door echoed into the emptiness inside. The smell hit him first, a pungent mixture of damp rot and something metallic. He winced, stepping cautiously into the dimly lit foyer. Flashlight in hand, he revealed a scene that made his stomach churn. The house was in shambles. Dust layered the furniture, sheets clung loosely to abandoned sofas, and faint water stains painted the ceiling with decay. Continuing forward, Ethan noticed something unusual on the floor. Scattered photographs strewn haphazardly, most of them torn. He knelt down, retrieving one. His pulse quickened as he squinted to make out the image. It was himself. "What the hell?" Ethan muttered, his voice echoing in the cold air. Another buzz from his phone pulled him from his thoughts. This time, the notification read, "Welcome home, Ethan." Before Ethan could process the bizarre turn of events, a loud thud behind him made him spin around. The door he had entered slammed shut with a force that shouldn't have been possible given the gentle wind. He sprinted back, jiggling the knob. Locked. His breathing grew shallow, panic clawing its way to the surface as he realized he was trapped. "Hello?" He called out into the silent house, his voice trembling. "Is anyone here?" No response. A faint shuffling sound suddenly came from deeper within the house. Ethan froze, his hand clenching the flashlight tightly. "Who's there?" he shouted, but only silence answered him. He began to creep forward, a growing sense of violation creeping up his spine. Each step seemed amplified, the creaks beneath his feet betraying his stealth. Shadows danced along the walls as his flashlight flickered, adding an eerie movement to the empty spaces. Then he saw it. Movement. A shadow zipped past the doorway ahead, so fast he couldn't catch more than a glimpse. Ethan gasped, stepping back. His heart thundered in his chest. Determined to find a way out, Ethan pressed forward, each creak of the ruined floorboards heightening his fear. Every room he passed seemed worse than the last. Old furniture lay overturned and claw-like marks raked across the walls. The deeper Ethan walked into the house, the more it seemed to claw at his memory. Faint whispers trailed behind him, haunting thoughts he couldn't shake. Who lived here? Why did this place feel familiar? As he turned into the next room, he came to an abrupt stop. Plastered across the walls were more photographs, dozens of them, and each image was of him. Ethan as a child. Ethan as a teenager. Ethan as he looked now. A nauseating sense of familiarity swept over him, but the details were murky. Rinse and repeat fragments of memory he couldn't fully access. A loud, guttural whisper erupted from behind him. "Welcome home." Ethan turned sharply, his flashlight illuminating the figure he'd seen in the shadows. Standing there was a grotesque, pale figure, its eyes hollow and body twisted unnaturally. It twitched violently as it stepped closer. "What do you want?" Ethan screamed, stumbling backward. The figure didn't answer, but instead tilted its head, its jaw hanging as though about to speak. Then suddenly it let out an ear-piercing scream and bolted toward him. Ethan ran. The narrow hallways worked against him as the house seemed to warp, growing darker and more cramped. Every corner he turned seemed to lead him back into the unnatural predator's path. He could feel its presence closing in. Leaping into what seemed to be a storage closet, Ethan pressed himself against the wall, his chest heaving. His phone vibrated again, startling him. Fumbling, he opened it to read, "You can't outrun the truth, Ethan." What truth? What was this? His head throbbed. Then in quick, fragmented flashes, he began to remember. The torn faces in the photographs weren't random. They were his parents. This was his childhood home. Something terrible had happened here. The door to the closet began to rattle violently, snapping Ethan back to the present. With a scream, the door burst open, and the twisted figure loomed above him. Its hollow, soulful eyes bore into his own, as if searching for something within him. In a split second, Ethan realized what was happening. This wasn't just a delivery. Someone, or something, had lured him here because it knew. Deep within the fractured memories of his childhood were horrific truths he had buried. The night of his parents' deaths flashed before his eyes. A fire. A shadowy presence. This presence. Was it his fault? Did it happen because of him? He couldn't tell anymore. The figure drew closer until Ethan screamed, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." The entity froze, staring at him for a moment longer before letting out a blood-curdling scream. Everything went dark. Ethan woke up outside on the soggy ground. His scooter was parked beside him at the edge of the property. The house he had wandered into was gone. Only an old, charred foundation remained, suggesting it had burned down years ago. His phone buzzed once again. "Delivery complete. 5 stars." Frantically, he opened the app to find no record of the order at all. Confused, traumatized, and soaked, Ethan climbed onto his scooter, vowing to never return. Yet, as he sped away, one unsettling thought lingered in his mind. Was it over? Meanwhile, back at the app's algorithm hub, another driver received the same notification. High priority delivery, double pay. The cycle had begun again.